Today we are going to talk about the Galion TS120 tube integrated amp that I'm about to bring to market. Loic, one of my audio buddies, dropped by the other day, and within 5 minutes after listening to the Galion TS120, he said, "Thomas, oh my god, if the Doge 10 tube integrated amp is a unicorn, this is a Pegasus." So about a year and a half ago, I reviewed the Doge 10 tube integrated amp and called it a unicorn. At the time, just before my video created a tsunami of orders for Doge, Mr. Liu, the Doge designer, had a lot of free time. So I asked him to build me a KT150 tube integrated amp. Now the reason why you will see similarities in features between the Doge 10 MK3 and the Galion TS120 is because Doge not only adopted my voicing from my modified Doge 10 amp, but they also implemented some of the ideas I had for the TS120. Originally, they were going to build me a KT150 amp, but after giving it some serious thought, we ended up deciding on a more affordable KT120 amplifier. I remember at the beginning of the project, I asked Mr. Liu, what do you need to build me the very best amp he could with his 35 plus years of experience? He said, a bigger budget? And I said, "Bin, anything you need. I don't want anything holding you back." In fact, there were some components I insisted on using more expensive ones. For example, I replaced some of the capacitors in my initial sample with capacitors that cost like 50 times more in the second sample. Well, that's the special edition. For the tone control knobs, I wanted a decent one from Japan instead of a regular budget one. These are like examples. So after waiting for a year and a half, my audio buddies, today I have finally gotten the Galion TS120, and the second I powered it up, I was like, oh my god. The bass and dynamics have exceeded my expectations. I was so worried it had the same level of bass as the Doge 10 MK3, but nope, big difference. I've spent the last few weeks making some final adjustments, and finally, it is ready for production. But only for a few of you, and that is because Doge told me, "Thomas, man, we only have the bandwidth to build you a very, very limited amount this year." Is it weird that I wish and don't wish to have a deck where 1,000 people waiting problem? For that reason, today's video is not about me trying to sell you an amp, whether you need one or not, but I will instead focus on trying to describe the product as accurately as possible, so only the right people will buy it. After all, I only have a limited number of it. My wife was joking with me, "Thomas, man, you only have a limited number, so you know what? Sign it and sell it for $10,000 each." So let's start with the specs. The Galion TS120 is a tube push-pull amplifier that can use either 4 KT88, 6550, or 1 KT120 tubes for power tubes. So it also uses 212AX7, 212AT7 for preamp. Output is 30 watts in Class A and 50 watt in Class AB. Now let me tell you a story. So I brought the amp to get it measured independently. The TS120 actually outputs more power than what Doge told me. For example, in Class A, using KT120, it can go up to 46 watt instead of the rated 30 watt. I asked Doge and they told me, "Man, we'd rather be conservative." The TS120 comes with 4 Pavan KT88C tubes. Now, it's weird how Pavan label their tubes. KT88A is the worst, B is normal, C is above average. Was it because the owner never got A at school? The tube amp weighs 75 pounds. I don't know of any other tube integrated amp that uses 4 KT88 and weighs as much. Now, I've been building a lot of bicep muscles bringing this amp around the last few weeks. If you are old school like me, thinking that the heavier it weighs, the better quality, yeah, for sure, the TS120 would not disappoint you. One of the biggest highlights of the TS120, the amplifier has a dedicated power supply for the preamp tubes and one for the power amp tubes. So basically, that is like having a separate preamp and power amp in one single chassis. I was so tempted to ask them to build it with 2 power plugs. I don't think any tube integrated amp around this price has a dual power supply design like this, and I tried Googling it. If you know of any tube amp that has it and does not cost the price of a car, please put it in the comments. Next, rarely seen in this price bracket, a stereo subwoofer output. It also has a tape out, which you have to be careful because it outputs at maximum volume, and an HT bypass, so you can integrate it with your home theater easily. So next, unlike most tube integrated amp on the market, you can put this amp to standby by using the remote. I bet you there's only a handful of tube integrated amps in the market, in the world, that can do that, especially at this price. Just for the ability to turn on and off with the remote, Doge had to add a dedicated transformer in the amp. Next, it has a nice solid high quality metal remote. High quality because it is so solid that you can send somebody to the hospital if you throw it at them. Make sure you hide it whenever you are having an argument with your significant other. Finally, unlike every single tube integrated amp on the market, which usually has a triode or ultralinear mode, the Galion TS120 has Class A and Class AB mode. Okay, it's not 100% Class A, but it is heavily biased into Class A, and the current almost doubles in Class A mode. Changing classes and biasing are all controlled by a microchip. You just have to press a few buttons, either on the remote or on the amp, to initiate the auto bias. No need to use a screwdriver to auto bias. Sadly, I'm not a technical person, so I can't really make sense of what's inside the amp. My audio buddy, Mr. Amplifier, who builds amplifiers, was surprised by the number of quality parts in it. Now, I did notice that the choke is humongous compared to other tube integrated amps on the market. Well, does bigger mean better? I don't know. Well, you can ask your significant other. Darling, is bigger better? I bet she'll say, yeah, a bigger choke is definitely better. Overall, the inside layout seems really nice and clean. Next, the amplifier has a sound profile and tone control, which I will come back later on. It has a soft start to help extend the life of your tubes, and an auto shutdown protection circuit, so it has everything you need. Well, almost. I asked them to design it to also make coffee, but they said no. Okay, no more dad jokes. Now, for simplicity, the Galion is priced at a pre-order price of $3,495 with free shipping and customs included worldwide. That's for the standard version, and $4,495 for the special edition version. The only thing, I was planning just to sell in North America in the beginning, but I got quite a bit of requests worldwide. So if you want, yeah, sure, go ahead, pre-order, and I'll get in touch with you to see what I can do for you. Finally, the B-roll of the amplifier you see in today's video is my pre-production sample. The final version will be different. The labels will be different, and that's thanks to everyone's feedback. So, how does it sound? With stock tubes. I have to emphasize stock tubes because it sounds different with non-stock tubes. If you want that smooth, euphonic presentation where you can just relax, okay, get in line for a deckwear amp. Here, I just eliminated some of my potential buyers because, as I said, I want the right people to buy this amp. If deckwear is a luxury sedan, yeah, then the TS120 is a modern high-performance supercar. Detail, extended, fast, dynamic, airy, 3D holographic, punchy, and transparent. It is not a smooth, neutral, soft-sounding amp. You know I like color, MSG, and a Maui V-curve. So guess how I would voice my amp. The top end is extended, sharp, and you have no problems hearing micro details. It will sparkle like no tomorrow. Mid-range has a very, very slight upper mid-range bump, so it has a slight forward presentation with stock tubes. Not that there's a mid-bass bump, but you will feel there's a lot of meat on the bone. The bass is nuanced, fast, fun, and dynamic. It is so dynamic that it can rival a lot of solid-state amps. Soundstage is its main strength. Airy, 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 with multi-layer and body. You know what? I'll elaborate on how it sounds throughout the video. So let's start with what you should be aware of if you plan to buy this amp. Usually when people want to sell you something, they would say things like, oh man, this is the best thing ever. The capacitors, the internal wires are made in the hidden mountains of the Himalayas, and they're so beautiful that they even glow in the dark. Yeah, I'm not going to do that, okay? 4 things you should be aware of. First, in Class A, it gets a bit warm. Nothing close to other Class A amps. You cannot cook an egg on it, okay? But you should still be aware of that. Second, the transformer hum from the TS120 is as quiet as a Hego H300. At 1 or 2 feet, yeah, you hear a low hum, but nothing like not normal compared to other amplifiers. So I did ask Doge about this. Why don't we just use a toroidal transformer? And they told me, you know, it's all a question of compromise. You will not get the same sustained power and dynamics. I kid you not, even my wife, who is not an audiophile, told me she noticed the kick that, you know, this amp can produce. It's mind-boggling. Mr. PS Audio, I call him that because he owns a lot of PS Audio gear, told me, hey man, he never knew a tube amp can be so dynamic, and he has tried the big names. Third, the sound will change with break-in. Those clarity caps, man, need a lot of time. Now, I'm not trying to get you to go beyond the trial period because there is no trial period. Another thing you should be aware of is the TS120 protection circuit is a bit sensitive with KT120 tubes. Now here you can see I bought a lot of KT120 tubes because I wanted to test it properly, and I noticed with some tubes it will cause the protection circuit to trip easily, shutting down the amplifier. Now having said that, I was still able to get all my KT120 working fine, and I've created a video on the Galion YouTube channel explaining what to do, which I'll upload shortly. Now I would say if using KT120 is an absolute must for you, then keep this known issue in mind. Finally, like most high-end gear, there are certain things this amp push to the limit. This is a lively sounding amp. In Class A, stock tubes, analytical setting, I might change the name, and with maximum sharpness and transparency, you get an airy soundstage that not many tube amps can do in this price range. So the amp has a lot of clarity and air, and as I always say, high-end audio is not easy to get right. But if you get it right, it will pull away from entry-level audio by a mile. Well, after all, how else do you think high-end audio differentiates itself? If you want a soundstage that is so thick that you will suffocate when you walk into it, yeah, you have to push the boundaries. Originally, the first sample, the TS120, the voicing, the brightness, everyone said it's fine, it's perfect. But you know what? I like detail and refined sound. So in the last 2 weeks, I've changed the voicing so much on this amp that the refinement, clarity, and detail can now swim in the same swimming pool as this Cayin Soul 170 $6,000 integrated amp. So if you have a neutral, smooth, or dark sounding speaker like the Q Acoustic Concept 500, you're going to have a blast with this amp. But what if you have Klipsch or Focal? Well, Mr. Cantor has no problem running it in analytical mode with a Sopra 2, but I would say most people probably would need to change the tubes to a smoother sounding tube, like the TAD 6550 tubes, and also put it to musical settings if you really have to. Either that or just use the tone control. Now the tubes that come with the amplifier are on the livelier side, which gives a small upper mid-range bump. Sharp, but exciting. Now, to keep the video short, I've edited out a lot of things I want to say. I've created a second channel for Galion. So go subscribe, and on that channel, I'll talk about how the TS120 sounds with different speakers. There'll be sound demos, owner system videos, tube rolling videos, and so forth. So, let's move on to the positives. Get a coffee. It will be a long list. So to help me evaluate this unit, I had all my audio buddies listen to it, and I even involved people outside my usual audio circle because I wanted a fair assessment. The problem is this: if I tell you everyone loved it, it's meaningless. Like Loic told me the other day, hey man, this amp just beat all the tube amps you have lent me. If I told you that, Many of you will say, well, really, Thomas? What else are you going to say? So, unlike my other videos, I'm going to minimize sharing what my audio buddies thought about this amp. The first thing you'll notice with the TS120 is the airy soundstage. Even if you have experienced tubes before, you'll notice that the TS120 is airier compared to even other tube amps. I say this because, as you know, I've tried more than 30 plus tube amps, and only a handful of them have the airiness of the TS120, and those are very expensive, like $6,000 amps, like the synthesis I have here, the monoblocks. Yeah, fantastic soundstage, but $6,000. So, do you know why I say some tube amps sound like solid state? Partially, it's because they lack air in the soundstage. So just because you bought an expensive tube amp, or a very popular tube amp, which I will not name, you might actually still be getting solid state sound without knowing it. With stock tubes, another thing you'll notice about the Galion TS120 is that it has a lot of power and torque. The attack is really strong, so cymbals and drums, for example, tend to hit harder. Although nowhere as elevated as the Yamaha AS2200, it does remind me of the Yamaha slight mid-range bump. That is why Mr. Carver told me, hey man, music sounds like there's more energy playing through the TS120. Now, because the attack is stronger, the edges of the instruments are more apparent. As a result, the imaging and separation of the instrument are quite impressive. Next, the amp is fun to listen to because of the mild V-curve. With stock tubes, Loic, my audio buddy, noticed exactly the same as me. He said, man, dude, this is a Wilsonton R8 on steroids. If you look back at all my videos on the Wilsonton R8, you'll notice I've always said it's a fun amp to listen to. The only shortcoming I've mentioned is the bass is not nuanced, and I wish the R8 had more control. The Galion is as fun, but the difference is the bass is more refined, nuanced, and controlled. Well, at double the price, it better be. That is why Mr. Kanta told me he has more fun listening to the Galion than his super crazy expensive neutral sounding audio research setup. Another positive of the TS120 is despite it only rated at 30 watt in Class A and 50 watt in Class AB, it has a lot of power. Maybe because it has a lot of current. I tested it on difficult speakers like the Focal Sopra 2, the Quad 2905, no problem at all. Not one speaker I tried had a problem. If it can drive the Focal Sopra 2 and Quad 2905, it can drive anything. I tried on budget speakers, $10,000 speakers, $50,000 speakers, no problem. I guess the biggest question is the Magnepan. I have the Magnepan LRS 0.7 and 1.7i now, and in short, yes, the TS120 can drive it, but I would still recommend for Magnepan, it's best to go with solid state. My logic is you don't need the airy soundstage help from the TS120 because Magnepans are very airy by themselves. Next, let's talk about the sound profile switch. So you got three settings: analytical, tone, and musical. You know what? I might change the name in the final version. The analytical mode is the sharpest and most transparent. You will hear all the micro details in the recording. For musical setting, it tones down the upper mids just a bit. The amp is still sharp and you will not sound veil, but it will be a bit smoother sounding and rounder. The delta between analytical and musical is not really big, but there's still a difference. Most of my audio buddies prefer musical, well, except maybe Mr. Kanta, he loves the analytical mode. And well, either way, it'll bypass tone control. So let me tell you a story. I was chatting with Harley from Pearl Acoustics, and I told him, you know, I was debating what frequency should I choose for my tone control to affect. And Harley had access to a recording studio, and what he did, he would re-record a song I sent him, which I found to be a bit harsh, and he would drop specific frequencies when he re-record the song. So I would choose the one that sounded the best, and then I tell Doge, look, this is the frequency that I'll let you to work on. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the details and with the outcome of the implementation. I will say this, the tone control only affects the sound a bit, about 3-4 dB. So the range is really small. However, you will notice, interestingly, that when you lower the treble on it, the top end, that sparkling part, will not be affected. It will not sound like you have a pillow in front of your speakers. So it's not a typical tone control. The soundstage and phase issue will not be affected. The upper mid-range will be just a bit smoother. I mean, just a bit, okay? And finally, this is one of the few amps on the market that can run in either Class A or AB. Now, to be honest, I actually don't know of any other amp who can run in either Class AB or heavily biased into Class A. The current is almost double in Class A, while in Class AB, the wattage is almost double. Do not confuse this with trial and ultralinear mode, which you'll find with every single other tube amps. What I noticed is with some speakers, you will hear a significant difference, okay, with Class A and Class AB, while with others, not that much. Perhaps it depends on how your speaker responds to a high current amp. I mean, who knows? If we take the Silverline Sonata, for example, when you switch to Class A, you'll notice that the mid-range will sound a bit more linear and have more clarity. Instruments will hit a bit harder, which results in a more airy soundstage and better instrument separation. However, it is a bit more forward. So just don't assume you will prefer Class A over Class AB. I personally use Class AB when I go for longer listening sessions because, it's a bit more laid back. While for shorter listening sessions, yeah, I'll go with Class A. Interestingly, most of my audio buddies prefer Class A. Now, I'll be offering two versions, okay? The difference between the Galion TS120 and the TS120 Special Edition is that the Special Edition uses many higher end components, like a few $100s more. Also on the side, there'll be like this piano black wood. In terms of sound differences, the bass is richer with this SE version, a slightly smoother mid-range, and instrument separation is a bit better. Overall, perhaps a 7 to 10% improvement. Okay, so let's end this video. Where does the name Galion come from? I asked my subscribers to help me think of a name. Jean-Francois sent me this PowerPoint, and the first second I saw it, I loved it. Galion is a ship, and it's French for galleon. I've spent most of my life in Quebec, Canada, and French is part of me, so it made sense for me to choose a French name. Next, when I saw the PowerPoint, there were photos of calm and rough seas. It reminded me of my life where I've gone through a lot of good and bad times. For example, I had a gambling problem at one point of my life, so I ended up sleeping in my car. Or just like a lot of you, right? Relationship breakups and so forth. But music has always been there to help me through those tough and good times. So, my wish is for the Galion to make beautiful music, helping many of you through your tough and happy times. Corny? Sure, but meaningful. TS120, well, TS is for Thomas and Stereo. Think of it as our secret handshake. 120 because it supports KT120. Pretty cool, huh? So, with that, I'll see you next time.